Gender, sexism, feminism, all of those things have been spoken about an awful lot for quite some time now within the gaming industry. At last. I think it's fantastic to see how women are really saying, hey guys, come on, we're here. Role-playing games and games are not just for men. This is not a boys thing. This is not boys club. We are here. Oh, and it's quite amazing how people actually are paying attention, saying, oh, actually, yeah, that's right.
And also women in the gaming industry as developers and designers and producers of these things as well. So this session that's coming up, I suspect, is going to be quite popular.
Yeah.
Particularly amongst the women who are present today, I think, because it'd be nice to hear that voice. And I expect it to be a kind of bumper crowd, really.
Yeah, I should expect so, and I'm quite looking forward to actually hear the perspective of a woman, because let's face it, we don't hear that perspective often enough. You know, we don't hear, guys, this is what's happened, this is how it feels like, and you need to pay attention to that, and actually to companies as well.
Well, I wonder if part of the reason why this session is on is because of the page 27 issue. Because, you know, in the Dragonmeet guide that we got this morning when we arrived, there's page 27 is a harassment policy, which is what is not acceptable behaviour. And, you know, obviously, I think the hobby does have a stigma of being very male-dominated.
Yeah.
And I think there are, the majority of people present at Dragonmeet today, so far that I've seen, have been male. But it'd be nice to see not just the women saying, here we are, but the men saying, here they are as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The acceptance has been quite good. So I think this one should be an absolute cracker of a seminar. So I think we should just shut up and let the women do the talking.
Yes.
Hello and welcome to G&G Adventures in Gender and Gaming. I'm Anisha Murray. I'm the founder and convention director of It's Con Air, if anybody is familiar with the Irish games scene. And I'm also the editor-in-chief of The Gazebo, a UK and Irish-based RPG e-zine. And more immediately pertinent, I'm your chair for today. With me today is Lynn Hardy. She is a freelance writer, editor, educator, and has written for pretty much most of the biggest UK role-playing companies, including Nightfall Games, Pelgrane Press, Cubicle 7, and Modifius Entertainment, where she is also the line manager for Achtung Cthulhu?
Yes.
Was my German okay there?
Which was probably about as good as mine, yes.
Oh, okay. And we also have Paula Dempsey, who's been gaming for about 25 years. She started writing scenarios for Vampire as part of her contribution to her regular gaming group. Some years later, she drew on her interest in folklore and the occult to write the Gold Emmy Award-winning The Book of the Smoke for Pelgrane Press, and she's also contributed to Robin Law's Hillfolk project. So basically, we're here today to talk about how to expand the hobby, to look at the gender disparity in the hobby, and also look at gender as a role-playing experience in and of itself, and hopefully to have a positive discussion about how to make the gaming experience great for all players without discrimination. So, firstly, Lynn, could you tell us how you initially got involved in the RPG industry?
It's all down to American football, basically, rather weirdly. When I was at school, I knew about D&D and things, and, you know, I'd seen a bit in E.T., and there was a dreadful episode of Taggart. I don't remember if anybody... Yay! Yay! Way to represent a gaming hobby. So, yeah, there was all this sort of strange thing about it. And I went off to university really hoping that I would find a gaming group, and I went down to the first night party at my hall of residence, and it was in Newcastle, and it was miles out of the centre, so we didn't tend to go in and mix with all the hoi polloi in there. And I put my Seattle Seahawks football top on, because I was also an American football fan. And the Seattle Seahawks, you know, you had to actually go hunting for that sort of thing in the days before internet shopping. She says, admitting to how old she is. And there was a gang of lads there, and they came up to me and started chatting to me. It must be said, partly because they were surprised to see a Seattle Seahawks top, but also because it was a girl wearing a Seattle Seahawks top. And I discovered that they were all avid role players, and they invited me into the group. And after one session, my first game actually was RuneQuest. I inherited somebody's dwarf, Shirley. Had a greyhound. Well, no, it was a big wolfhound. She used to ride it as well. Awesome character. And it was never an issue that I was a girl. I was just someone who wanted to play games. And literally, second session, it's like, right, we want to run something old-fashioned we haven't done for ages. Here's D&D Red Box. go run it for us. Didn't do that for very long because they could quote all the stats at me, so I picked up Talaslanta and started playing that. That summer when I went home, the lads I'd actually done my A-levels with, I was in a small village school. It was 1,000 kids, but there were only, 20, 30 people in the sixth form. I was the only girl that did all 3 sciences at A-level. And it turned out that the lads I'd done the sciences with were role players. And they said, oh yeah, we did that. We didn't ask you to join. And I never actually found out whether it was because they honestly didn't think I was interested or whether it was because I was a girl. And I would have to say that's been my only episode of slight sexism in gaming. And I suspect it is just because they didn't honestly think I'd be interested rather than anything else.
Oh, okay. No, that's really interesting. So you would say you haven't experienced much sexism in gaming?
No, I haven't. I don't know whether that's just because I'm a tomboy or I'm utterly oblivious. It could be that. I am usually fairly oblivious. So I don't know. Either I've been incredibly lucky or I just know some really lovely people.
Oh, let's go with both. You've been lucky and you've met some really lovely people. How about you, Paula? How did you initially get involved in the industry, and what difficulties, if any, do you think women face in terms of getting published within the industry?
Okay, that's interesting. I got involved in the industry kind of by accident, because I was playing in a regular gaming group. I don't play regularly at the moment. It's a lovely treat when it happens, but it doesn't happen very often. But the last group I was in before I stopped gaming regularly had Simon Rogers from Pelgrane Press in it. And they wanted a book about the occult, and he'd seen my library. So initially it was, I swear this happened, they swear it didn't. They said, can you just do some research for us? And then after I'd submitted, I think, 20 to 30,000 words, they said, we like that, can you write the same amount again and we'll turn it into a book? They say they asked me to write a book from the start.
Okay.
So it was kind of accidental. I've been gaming for a while, and I haven't experienced an enormous amount of sexism. I did have a GM at one point that used to kill my character every week. But I think that was more about an individual with a problem than it was about inherent gender bias. We just didn't get on. So again, I think I've been quite fortunate. And I think just wandering around and seeing things today, though, there's still a disproportionate amount of, we're half the population, but we're not half the books here. Or, maybe it's just only weird ladies are attracted to it, I don't know.
Weird and proud.
Weird and proud of it. But nobody ever said, I don't want you to be in my group because you're a woman. There was one occasion somebody said, I don't think you should play this because I don't think you'll understand the rules, which was a bit peculiar. That's probably the closest it came.
Yeah, interestingly, kind of as a bit of research for this panel, I kind of set up this little Facebook think tank, where most of the female gamers that I know, so there's about 40 to 50 women kind of in that think tank. And one of the issues that kind of came up that women have experienced in terms of just sitting down at the gaming table is having GMs turn around and say, well, I'm not comfortable with you playing a male character because that's just weird for me.
Weird. That's very strange. No, actually, I think you've managed to pick 2 completely atypical women who've never had a problem. So this is going to be fun. No, I've never had that. I've had way worse sexism to deal with outside of gaming than I ever have in it. As a research scientist. My chemistry teacher at school told my mum that I had a good brain for a girl. And that was the sort of attitude. I was actually told that I couldn't do all sciences at O-level, never mind A-level, because I was a girl. Not by the science stuff, that was by the careers teacher.
That's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous.
So actually, the gaming community has never been anything like that. You get the lads who think that they can use it as an excuse to hit on you, but you'd get that wherever you went, if you were a relatively small number, in terms of representation. But no, most of you are normal human beings. You're very nice and friendly and sweet. there's some strange people, but we do. There are in any hobby.
We're a pretty inclusive bunch, really.
We are very inclusive, which I'd like to think we are.
Yeah.
I would like to think we are.
I do think it's interesting because there is such a gender disparity, and I think it's interesting because while the gender disparity in the hobby seems to be getting slightly better, that doesn't seem to have kind of trickled over into the industry. So while we seem to be getting more female gamers, they're not getting represented in publishing. So why do you think that is? And is there possibly any advice you could give to women, or indeed anyone who's interested in getting published, in how you went about getting published, or what steps you would advise people to take?
Oh, I was just desperately cheeky and sent off a sample scenario to Wopsy. Because I was running Talisanta. I was like, I could do this. And I sent them some sample scenarios. And then spent huge amounts of money in a phone box trying to call them, because they'd said to ring them back, only I couldn't call them collect from the phone I was on. They invited me down to Euro Gen Con, and the rest is sort of history. And that's how I ended up working with Nightfall Games and all the lovely lads up at Glasgow.
That's really interesting, because I write a lot of convention scenarios, particularly in Ireland, where I think I've been writing them for about nearly 8-9 years now. But I would never have the kind of audacity, if you're okay with me using that, to just kind of send something off. Because there's also this aspect which we kind of talked about prior to this, about having the idea that if you are a minority, that when you put yourself forward, there's kind of this pressure, a sense of pressure that you're representing your gender, and kind of the experience of that, there's kind of this added pressure.
I don't think I felt that. I mean, from my perspective, I think the main thing is kind of get your unique selling point. Sorry to use jargon, but if you know something about something, whether it's understanding a game system or whether it's about something that would make a good setting, push your idea, promote your idea. It's a shame if people do feel that they can't come forward because they're women, because I think the industry is far more receptive now.
Yeah. I had an interesting conversation with a friend of mine. She this is about console gaming, but she did her master's in console gaming, and she was asked to kind of come in and teach a course, of which course of about 20-25 people, there were only about 5 girls, and that trickled off until there was only 1. And at the end, there was kind of a point where they actually had to go up and play games as part of this course. And the girl basically turned around and said to her, I don't feel comfortable playing the game in front of everyone in the class, because I'm a girl, and there's just this sense of pressure that if I'm somehow not good enough, or if...
It depends on the group as well. I mean, both myself and Paula have been teachers, so it does very... You do presentations, you've worked in education. So the weird thing is that group dynamics can turn like that, and it isn't always down to the fact that she's always a girl. If the group, you can get hostile groups no matter what the makeup is, where people aren't comfortable doing things in front of any form of group. One of the things we were chatting about for setting this up was the disparity in the different branches. I mean, the computer games industry has a really bad reputation towards women in general in the way that they're treated. There was a young artist we met at Gen Con. She'd brought her portfolio to Gen Con to show around, and she was amazed at how nice everybody was to her at Gen Con, because she'd just been at a computer games one where they were all really horrible to her because she was a female trying to break into artwork in computer games. And yet, one of the playtest groups for Cogs and Cakes, they were on the computer games degree down at Middlesbrough University, and there were a lot of women doing that. Different aspects of it, quite often the art and design side of things, but they were having no problems at all. So you've got to be careful not to take isolated incidents and then extrapolate and put that on to everybody. But it is weird the way that you see different numbers of women in different aspects of the area. And we were chatting about this with a guy from BBC Radio T's earlier this week, about the fact that with Doctor Who, 15 years ago, if you'd have gone to a Doctor Who convention, you'd have been lucky to see any women at all, apart from maybe mums who'd taken their lovely but socially isolated sons along to a Doctor Who convention. Whereas now, we were at one in Newcastle a couple of weeks ago, you're looking at least 50% are now women because of the new series, because of the fact that the stories are now more emotionally involving and they're not just running around doing strange things and the Doctor being completely patronising to every woman he finds. So there are changes, and it's obvious. You see a lot of women doing live role-playing, you see a lot of women doing cosplay.
Yeah.
Why they don't do tabletop is what I find really interesting, and that's something I'd like to know, is why that they're not as interested in that, but they are happy to do the other forms of it.
It's interesting because I'm a member of a gaming group in London called Storygasm, and Storygasm is basically an LGBT friendly group, but what we've found is that we actually predominantly get a lot of female gamers, kind of even straight female gamers who are totally welcome. And I think one of the things that you can kind of extrapolate from that, or we were kind of trying to brainstorm why this has happened, is that the games that we're playing and the kind of ethos, the very inclusive ethos that we're pushing forward, is something that women feel comfortable in terms of entering a new hobby and exploring, which is kind of a really, really interesting idea, whether kind of other different gaming groups could kind of...
Yeah, and it's, you know, are the games out there that women want to play? I mean, there was somebody who was saying this morning that to me that, you know, like the girlfriend had tried Dungeons & Dragons and it really wasn't her thing, and they didn't know that there was anything else out there that would be interesting. So it's whether we've got the diversity in gaming, that there's things out there that would appeal to a more female audience. I think we do. I don't necessarily think that people know about it. Maybe that's just the thing, is that the industry as a whole needs to be getting out there and getting known a bit more, so that people know there are all these fantastic indie games that you can game anywhere and in any setting and do all sorts of wonderful things, and that might well help. Just having more groups that go out, get involved in things, sort of as advocates for the hobby in general, rather than...
I completely agree that we need to make people aware that there's more to it than Dungeons & Dragons. I'm a little bit, maybe playing devil's advocate a bit here, but I'm a little bit worried about this, what you said about sort of stories that are perhaps more about relationships or whatever being engaging, because I think that actually makes assumptions about what is going on in people's heads. You know, we're not women as this sort of big amorphous category. I think it is true. I mean, I would say for myself, that was a game that would interest me. The idea of a 4-hour dungeon bash, quite frankly, I'd be run out of here screaming. But, you know, we can't actually assume that because of people's gender or biological sex, that their brain's wired like that.
Yeah, maybe what I should have said is that people...
I'm not having a go at you.
No, that's fine. No, it's fine. And it's a point worth making, because that was me sort of... It's wrong vocabulary. We're writers. We're supposed to use the right vocabulary. Is storytelling. It's on storytelling rather than bashing things over the head and nicking their stuff.
And that I think, though, is equally applicable to an awful lot of men in the hobby as well.
Yeah.
And actually, in my view, they're better games, but that's down to personal bias, I suppose.
We're running short on time, and one thing I was really, really keen to kind of talk about is also using role-playing as a way to explore gender, because one of the things that I think we need to be aware of is that sex, sexuality and gender are all very, very different things, and that gender is very much kind of a cultural concept, and role-playing actually lends itself as a really, really interesting avenue to explore the concepts of gender in a really, really safe, interesting environment.
I suppose it does, yeah.
Yeah, what would you think about?
Well, the main experience we've had of it is I've done an awful lot of stuff in Second Life, not so much over the last few years, but in Second Life we were part of the community of Caledon, which is a big steampunk society, and an awful lot of transgender people were there playing as the gender that they were hoping to become through corrective surgery in real life. And it gave them a chance to be who they wanted to be, free of anyone's preconceptions, because of course the first thing that you saw was their character in the days before, their avatar. In the days before we had voice on Second Life, you had no idea what gender the person was that you were talking to. You accepted them as a person, not a bunch of preconceived ideas. And, you know, ideally, that's what we should be doing anyway with everybody that we meet. It should have nothing to do with their gender, orientation, race, colour, creed, anything. If they're an annoying idiot, they're an annoying idiot because that's their personality. Or if they're the sweetest person on earth, it's because they're the sweetest person on earth. And you shouldn't be looking at the package. It's what's, you know, the soul of the person, if you like, if you want to use that terminology. And I think that's, with something like Second Life, you could get past it because you have no preconceived ideas.
Absolutely.
It's peculiar that with role-playing generally, people would say, you know, today I'm going to be a medieval knight, or today I'm going to be a troll, or whatever, and everybody's really accepting of that. If you say, actually, today I'm going to be I'm going to pretend, I'm going to play a different gender, that's a bit weird. How big a great a leap of the imagination do you have to make?
I know. I also find it interesting. I haven't played it, but I really, really want to. Joel McDoldno, who's kind of an indie games designer, has a game called Rookvale, in which there are 6 different types of genders you can play, which I think is an absolutely amazing experience for anyone who wants to look into how to explore gender in a role-playing game. So basically his blurb is, it's a game of gender-queer, grim-dark Pokemon summoners.
I'm going to get this.
Absolutely amazing as that. Okay, so we've only 5 minutes left, and I really, really want to get some feedback from... Right, okay, hands are going, that's amazing. So it's going to be outdoor voices, unfortunately. But, Claire.
I wanted to say that I think marketing is the problem.
Okay.
When I first got into role-playing, I'd never heard of it at all before, initially 20 years ago. But no one had ever even, I hadn't even seen that scene in E.T. Even when you said that, I was thinking, there's a scene in E.T.? I have to go back and watch it. But we need to get the British town terribly else, get the message out there, because I think there's loads of women, particularly teenagers, who would be interested. They don't know it exists. They don't know how to find it. And, you know, I only found by accident, and I think loads of people have that experience. It's just by accident they found it out. So why are the gaming companies not sending flyers to schools, for example?
The college I used to work at, we had a wonderful librarian who was really keen to get a gaming group going because he knew what I did, he was a gamer, and we tried. And the school the college, they weren't interested because it wasn't their idea. We said, look, I know all these gaming companies, they'd love to get groups together to help. You know, we could sell it under the education banner of literacy, numeracy, storytelling, you know, developing the student skills. And they were just like, it's not our idea, we're not kind of interested, we'd rather play football. It's like, well, that's really inclusive and, you know, not very nice on a winter's day. So, yeah, sometimes schools just aren't interested because they don't understand it, or they just don't have the time, or they don't have anybody who's willing to run it, which is an unfortunate problem. With the cover of Cogs and Cakes, we made a very deliberate decision to have a very simple, iconic thing on the front, because I think as well, there's only so much female flesh on a cover that you can cope with seeing on the stand. Yeah, it is a little bit off-putting, apart from being probably very cold as well. I did an article 20 years ago not quite 20 years ago, for Valkyrie magazine about, wouldn't it be nice if they just painted women as something other than a whore or a hag?
Yes,
the
it really
grief I got for that. Okay, it's nearly 20 years ago, you'd kind of hope things had moved on. But no, I got some very unpleasant emails about that.
Do we have any other questions? Oh, lots. I'm going to go white shirt. Bradley, isn't it? Or Hanbury. Hanbury.
I had a bit of a strange experience. I mean, everyone keeps on saying how, you know, the hobby has become more inclusive. My experience is actually the reverse. When I was growing up, my all the role-playing clubs I remember were all 50% female. And one of the things, and we're not talking about, and one of the things I noticed was that the women in the groups got a lot of grief from other women.
Oh, women can be horrible. The worst bosses I've ever had have been women.
Who thought they were somehow portrayed, they were somehow ambassadors of their gender as opposed to individuals, and were somehow letting the slide down by liking certain types of games, not others. I've been running dungeon crawls for majority women groups for about 15 years, and I'm finding some of the attitudes you're coming up with from the state that you know, gaming needs to be more story-based as being little sexist. Because women like hack and slash too.
Yeah, no, I don't think we weren't saying that. I think...
Trust me, if you know, we're not talking about, I'm talking about engraving here, okay? I'm not talking about, you know, anything that involves, you know, sophisticated like feelings. I'm talking about which keep people's skulls in. You know, both on the tabletop and in the middle of the night with a big rubber sword. And if you've ever seen the police's reaction to 3 female half-orcs bearing down on carrying someone who's, you know, broken their leg in the middle of the night, it's quite a sight. The thing I've noticed is that I think that there's always this tendency for people to slip into saying, oh, well, you're a girl, therefore you must like this and you must not like this. And if you don't fit into that role, there's a lot of pressure. I think that might be very, very, very interesting.
Well, that's really interesting. I'm kind of torn between wanting to respond to that and realising we've only got a minute left and everyone else wants to get on board. So I don't know, yeah, possibly it'd be good to kind of get a discussion going on the forum about this, because I really, really do want to reply to that. But I will very, very quickly say my comment about story games and kind of my experience, the point that I was trying to make and possibly didn't articulate well enough there, I was trying to make the point that, as kind of was later brought up, that introducing the fact that there are different types of games will get more people into the hobby, and it's just our experience. I think experience been that because we're playing different types of games, people are more interested, or not more interested. People are interested in saying, oh, I hadn't realised this sort of role-playing game existed, and this seems like quite a safe environment and quite an inclusive environment for me to explore it.
Yeah, it's letting people know that there's more out there than that, so that if they aren't interested in that, then they know there is something for them to go to. My guilty pleasure is I love the Lego games on the consoles. I love going around. Smashing up Lothlorien was one of the happiest days I had in the Lord of the Rings one. So yeah, but
I'm going to take one final question we'll get from Becky at the back.
Based on conventions, what does Carol think about the fact that the audience in this room at the moment is about 50-50, and on the 3 previous seminars there's been less than 5% women in? Is this because this is a topic that really needs to be pushed a lot more, or is it just that everyone who's female in here, why are you in this seminar and not in the one about multimedia?
In a sense, I'm rather sorry this seminar's had to take place, that people have felt there's still an issue.
I'm really happy that it's taking place.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, you know, it's been great, but on the other hand, it's a shame that after so many years in the industry, we still haven't achieved inclusivity to the state where people actually think this isn't an issue anymore. I don't know what the topics of the previous seminars were, so I can't...
Steve doing the what was Steve Jackson, multimedia in gaming, and then I think we had Angus and Boniface doing this is what we're doing. Were your 3 previous?
I think what we really shortly, because I'm aware that we're running over time, and what we can take from the fact that this is an issue or a conversation and a discussion that a lot of people have views on, and it's something that people want to see progressed, and I definitely think that there's more room in the industry and the hobby for looking at this issue. And make for a longer seminar, definitely. But thank you very much to Paula and to Lynn, and thank you all for coming. Thank you.